to the Empowered Intuitive Academy podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Henderson, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Petra Costa. And you can find us at the Empowered Intuitive Academy on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. Get onto that shit. Give us a like, follow, subscribe. We would appreciate the support. Today, we are chatting about mythological creatures in pop culture. Did they get it right? And I think some did, and others just took a lot of creative license with how they represented their creatures. And I think, like, when we look at mythology and stuff, it's important to note that shit is going to evolve over time. And from what I found in the creatures that I looked into, that was very much the case. I don't know about you, Petra, because we went two completely different, like, routes with this.
I found exactly the same thing. And I think it's interesting based on our little reacts video we did the other day when we were talking about AI. And AI is a reflection of this time and this generation. And I think mythology is the same. Like, we use mythology as a learning tool, cautionary tales, etc. And they are a reflection of how society viewed different aspects at that time.
Yes.
And then when we look back on them now, and we I'm not going to say we reinvent them, but we look at them through a different lens.
Yes.
And when we look at that through a different lens, we start saying, oh, that really showed at that point in time.
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go straight in with the perfect example of this, I think, which is the beloved Medusa.
Medusa.
Now, I tried to make my hair all Medusa-y because I wanted it to look like a whole bunch of like snakes.
Yeah.
In a tribute.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. But that's fine.
I'm sure she appreciates your effort all the same.
I'm hopefully she realizes it's a nod.
Yeah.
But Medusa is a perfect example, because when you go back to ancient Greek mythology and Homer first speaks of a single Gorgon, a creature of the underworld.
Yeah.
And that was the earliest known record. But then we changed it up, and then there were three sisters.
Yes.
And it was three sisters. I'm not going to be able to say any of these right, but Steno, the mighty.
Yep.
Urail, the fast springer, and Medusa, the queen. And basically, Medusa got fucked over.
Yeah.
Really, really bad, both literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
She wasn't in any way, she didn't have the snake. She was just a gorgeous, beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Who was lusted after by a god.
Yes.
You'll be able to remember the god. I've got the god's name here. Poseidon got a bit raunchy.
Yeah.
And he decided to, in the original, when they talk about it in Greek mythology, originally, he just seduced her. But he seduced her in the temple of the Virgin Goddess.
Yes.
And this enraged, and that's Athena, yeah?
Athena, yep.
And Athena got ragey, and that's why she cursed Medusa.
Yeah.
Now, that's fine. And then there's all the stories that goes on that, Athena's not even happy enough to have cursed her for the fact that another god decided to. Now, remembering this god was having his way with everyone.
Yeah.
They were all basically.
They all had their way with whatever moved.
Human, goat, it doesn't matter. They were just.
Yeah.
They were just there and like going, oh.
Yes.
And not always did they do it in human form. Often they were like, oh,
no,
I'm gonna convert myself into a bull, and I'm gonna anyway. Let's not even go into the Minotaur. Let's not even go into that.
I was just thinking Minotaur, but I was also thinking in Norse mythology. This comes up with Loki when he turns into a fucking horse. What the hell? I suppose when you've lived forever, you've seen it all, and things get pretty quick.
I'm going to give it a go. Yeah. I want to give it a go.
I want to see what the hype's about. Right.
Let's see what it's all about. Anyway, so with Medusa, she then is sort of like lives in this underground world now where she's been cursed, that she's got these snakes, that her gaze would turn anyone to stone, which makes her a very solitary creature. Like, what kind of curse that you can't even look upon someone without destroying them?
Yeah.
And then Athena's not happy with that. She just then sends, what's his name, Perseus, to say, lop off her head and kill her,
Yeah.
so that they can then use her head as a weapon,
Yes.
which is like it's spoken about in a much more enchanting way when they talk about it. But when she originally started, the Gorgons, they weren't all of this, snake-headed things. They were just dread. They were
Yeah.
dread and awful, or grim of aspect, or glaringly terrible.
Yeah.
These are the words that we used. And then slowly,
Glaringly.
as slowly as each person then had another spin on it, it became more, the tale changed, and
It morphed, yeah.
yeah. And this talks a lot about, obviously, we don't even want to go into the male and the female, the downtrodden nature of, you know, masculinity and femininity in the ancient Greek world,
Yeah.
and Romans as well, because they
Yeah.
rewrote these tales.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing that now we look at it and with a different lens, and it's not seduction, it's rape.
Yes.
It's not an understandable curse and raging. It's victim shaming,
It's
blaming,
victim
and
shaming.
it's just literally terrible. And but it fascinated me how that now none of them relates to we can't say whether it was seduction or rape or anything like
Well,
that.
that's it. There's especially now in like the modernization of her tale, or at least
Yes.
looking through it from a different perspective, because
Yep.
as a good beloved sister, mentor, friend, Jen over at Sanctum of the Rose, because she works a lot with Medusa, and she likes to
Yep.
say myths are fishing stories. They change over time. And also when we're looking at beings and, mythological creatures and things from those time periods, antiquity has a different moral lens than we do. Like, it was
Yep.
nothing for a man to take a woman just because he wanted her. And, their sexual
Yep.
appetites were not necessarily, they weren't judged or anything.
No, they were praised.
Yeah, it was
It was
based. It was, yeah.
praised.
So,
Yeah.
and then there's also, keeping all that in mind, there's many ways to look at like the Medusa myth itself. It's like you said, was she seduced? Was Poseidon and Medusa actually a consensual thing, and Athena was just
Yep.
pissed off because they did it in the temple? Or
Yep.
was it that he did force himself upon her, and that Athena was trying to protect her by giving her these powers so that no man
Yes.
would take advantage of her ever again?
Ever again.
And I think just feeling into the mythos myself in, different ways and in
Yep.
different containers, I feel like Poseidon has a little bit of a fuckboy attitude. Like, he came in and it was like, and it kind of like the Jason and Medea vibes. If I don't know if you know about that myth, but Jason comes in, he's all like, praise Medea, I want to love you, I want to be with you forever, blah blah blah. And as soon as he gets his golden fleece, she's like in the trash.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how Poseidon would have went after Medusa. Like, she was this beautiful young maiden, this beautiful priestess. And keeping in mind virginism in the priestessing realm and stuff didn't necessarily mean chaste. It just meant sovereign, and it just meant that you were devoted to your deity, your god, your goddess. And so there is a violation in then that Poseidon defiles that relationship between Medusa and her goddess Athena.
Yep.
But when we're looking into Medusa, and it's so fascinating, she's older than the Greek.
Yes.
And this is something that not many people know. And
I
didn't find out until recently, but she's actually got ties to a triple lunar goddess from Libya. And if you look into like Berber culture and things like that, they have ties to Athena and a few other big goddesses that people know. But Yeah, so Athena and Medusa were a part of this lunar triad.
Yep.
So in that way, you could say they were sisters. You know, like they were
Yep.
close. So and I from that way, I would think that Athena would want to punish Medusa. I would think that she would want to empower Medusa to be like, see him, he's fucking trash. He is not worth your
Yep.
gaze. You know,
Yeah.
like worthy
And
is the man who can survive your your
your
your
gaze
gaze.
really in this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Look, this is
exactly.
interesting because I'd never thought to look at that Athena might have been actually been bestowing protections.
Yeah.
I
Well,
never
you think
thought of it
about
that way.
it. Medusa is on the front of the shields
Yes.
and used throughout that time period, antiquity, as a symbol of protection. You know, and
Yes.
when we're working with
Yes.
Medusa, like I was saying last week, she petrifies that which stands in your way and, you know, brings out your obstacles and things. So
Yeah.
she's quite an active presence and a talisman.
Well,
So
that's actually a nice take on it, actually.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't mind that. Now, when we talk about pop culture, obviously,
Mm,
we have a lot of the ones I could think of most notably when I was looking up pop culture references was obviously Percy Jackson.
yeah.
We have the Percy Jackson, we have the beautiful Uma Thurman doing a wonderful rendition, and she's more the one we look at in terms of the snakes' heads and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm,
And then the gaze, and we do them, the shield, shiny shield to freeze her as using her own powers.
yeah.
Um, we've also got references in Gods of War.
Yes.
And this is where I found this was interesting because when you look at Gorgons or Gorgons,
Go
however you want to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, they are also first described as being humanoid creatures with tusks. They're not even all about having the snakes on their heads and all
Snakes.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. They've got tusks, they've got roosters' feet, and in this Gods of War is true to that
Yeah.
rendition of it,
Yeah.
which I found was really interesting.
Mm.
And the one thing I also found really interesting that I had not known, I love Hercules in terms of, the from zero to hero and all of that.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that.
Yeah.
It's one of our favorite. I have it on my phone as a soundtrack. I've never
Yeah.
noticed that in that particular song bit in the Hercules story, the
Yeah.
Disney one,
Yeah.
that he kills Medusa. Now, obviously, Hercules didn't have anything to do with Medusa,
No.
but if you watch it, she's in there as
Yeah.
one of the things he's supposed to have gotten rid of. And in the games that go along with that franchise, she's a boss. So
Yes.
it's funny whether
Yes.
they've said, oh, look, it doesn't matter if it's Perseus or it's Hercules. Let's not worry. They're both
Yes.
heroes. So let's just mix it all
Yeah. And it
together.
makes me think of like the Lamia and that you know, in Elder Scrolls and all that sort of thing where they've got like these half snake, half women creatures.
Yes.
But it also reminded me of a show that I watched ages back called Atlantis, and it was supposed to be about Jason going down and doing all
Yep.
the playing out all the stories of ancient Greece, but they were in Atlantis before it sunk.
Yep.
It's a mismatch. It's a mismatch of like all different Greek figures and things. So it's got Ariadne and Pasiphae and who, you know, mothered the Minotaur and all that sort of thing. King Minos and
Yeah.
Hercules, but Hercules is played by bloody Fred Flintstone. So but in that Medusa is one of the characters and she gets with Hercules, but then she's cursed in a temple, and I can't exactly remember how it went down, but they turn her into like the Medusa, but she doesn't start out as being somebody, you know,
Yep.
evil or anything. She just, yeah, in wrong place
Yeah.
wrong time.
And when you look at the Clash of the Titans version of Medusa, that's where
Mm.
someone introduced her having the snake's body and tail, like
Yes,
when she
yes.
raises up. And I'll point out the one thing that got me is we're happy to portray Medusa in all these different ways, whether it's, the most notable is having the snakes as hair.
Yeah.
Even though in the original mythology it was snakes around the waist, it had nothing to do with the
Yes.
hair.
Yeah.
But almost in all instances, we're happy to give a body of a snake, but
Mm.
we've always got a big set of boobs on it.
Oh my god, yes. So That is so funny. Tim's been watching like all the randomest anime he can find on Crunchyroll lately because he's just gone through all the good stuff. So it's like, oh, let's see what this journey is. And he's watching one about like AI, funnily enough, about like machines and that. And he's going, I get that they're there to serve the humans, but why do they have to have big boobs? And I was like, one, because the anime creators are pervs, like that's just in their culture. It can't be kawaii unless it's got big tits, right?
Yep.
Secondly, maybe it's to make them feel more human, like
Yeah.
walk the walk, talk the talk. Like I'm not human, but I can get close to by having the accentuated features.
Peaches.
Anyway, big tit conversation. That's hilarious.
I think that's funny. Now, one other one that I found out in pop culture that had a Medusa reference was in One Piece. I didn't know
Really?
that. I didn't know that because I've actually only watched the one on Netflix, not the original cartoons or anime.
Yeah.
But what is interesting is that Boa Hancock, which is the Medusa reference in this particular thing, is able to petrify anybody that lusts after her, which ties back into your thought processes as being
Yeah.
a gift rather
Yeah.
than anything else. And they were said to have the three sisters, they were said to have extra pairs of eyes in their back so that they could petrify any of those that were foolish enough to look upon them.
Oh my
But
god. Yeah.
they actually talk about this in a series, and they've got it's got nothing to do with being gods. It's all the devil fruit that is all part of the One Piece,
Yeah. Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is they say that they were actually enslaved, and a lot of the markings they have in the body was actually part of them being enslaved. They tell this tale that it's a protective thing that they've got on themselves, but it was actually a branding. So they
Yeah.
don't have eyes on their back; they have a branding
They have a
from the people
branding.
that own them, and I found that was interesting. So I think that ties into the concept of mythology that we write our own tale based on what we want to project.
I think the biggest, yeah, exactly,
And I love it.
exactly.
And
I think the biggest thing that we have to address here is the revamp of the statue of Perseus in our Me Too movement. Not necessarily pop culture, but it's political.
yeah,
In the fact that she is holding his head.
yeah, I haven't seen that.
Haven't you?
No,
Oh my god, it was
I
huge.
I know she was part of the movement in
Yeah, so
terms of the
big.
people are getting tattoos now, and that's what
Yeah,
it represents part of,
yeah, so
yeah.
I can't remember the artist's name, but they made a statue which depicts Medusa holding the head of Perseus
Well, there you go.
and rewriting the narrative
Rewriting it.
of,
Yeah,
victims taking back their power.
that that's very interesting, isn't it? And again, that's just a
Yes,
morphology that we've got going on.
exactly.
Um, I'm going to finish off on this one, and this is the only reference I'm going to make to anything about psychology. But I had to remind everybody, they might remember back when we were talking about Siggy at one point in time,
Oh,
that he
Yep.
actually thought the whole thing around Medusa was about the fear of castration, and the
I
decapitation was
did
really,
read that somewhere, actually.
yeah, the
Yes.
terror. The terror of Medusa is thus the terror of castration that is linked to the sight of something. He analysed that it was the sight of, it was the shocking sight of the female genitalia that did not have a snake protruding from it, effectively.
Oh my god.
And, and that represented the loss of the penis and how literally frightening that is for men. So that's like decapitation
It's so
is as bad as
it's
losing it.
petrifying. It's petrifying.
And what he even goes on to speculate, which I think is hilarious, is the fact that these spectators stiffen with terror
Oh my god.
in terms of being turned to stone.
You
And
know
I'm
what
like,
that
dude,
reminds me of? You know what that reminds me of? Actually, pop culture reference, the basilisk in Harry Potter petrifying anyone who looks in its eyes.
yes. And I found
Mm.
that in mythology that that's a true reference, that it was believed to be able to do that, that
Yeah.
actually comes back from the true mythology. So I'll give her a tick there of being able to do that. I wonder if Ziggy, what he would have thought of that.
You're like, whoa, that's a big
They were going, oh, don't you castrate me.
Don't you come near me. Yes, well.
Don't you? Yes. Or he would have thought it was a representation of an aphrodisiac. Who knows with Ziggy? Who knows, Tay?
I don't think his mother would have approved either way. Oh my God. All right.
So that's what I've got to say about Medusa.
Medusa.
Okay, what have you got?
Oh. Like, cleanse my palate after that.
Sorry, I know. Ziggy's hard to take at any point in time, to be honest.
I'm surprised that anyone takes him seriously. So I went a funny route, actually. I actually can't even remember which one I started with, whether it was the angels or the fae, the fairies. I think it was fairies, because I recently watched the Watchers, which is like a new horror film with Dakota Fanning. A lot of people didn't like it. I actually did like it. I think it was a very original take on something that could have had a lot of potential to go wrong. And the reason I chose fairies is because the fae or fairies, how they're depicted in pop culture, are totally not what they were in mythology at all. And so when we think of fairies today, we think of like Tinkerbell and Winx and, things that little girls love. Winged little women getting around, granting wishes, even like the Tooth Fairy and stuff like that, which is kind of just weird as fuck, because, you leave a bloody offering of teeth to some little pagan spirit who, comes and takes it and drops you a coin.
It takes a bit of your body away. Yeah. Really, effectively, it's part of your body.
Yeah, that's a sacrifice. That's definition of it, an offering, a sacrifice. Like, y'all practicing witchcraft over here. But there's a lot of deep mythology about the Fae, and not a lot of it is pleasant, in the fact that they are known to be notoriously tricksters, and even to the point where they will take your children.
Yeah, quite vindictive
for your own. They can be little fucking assholes, and they're not necessarily the little people we think of them to be. And that's how they've been described, even in like, the lands of origin, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, all that, Britain. They're described as the little people, and they're chalked down to cute garden gnomes and leprechauns and all this sort of thing. And I think in pop culture, the only people that actually get them right to a degree are the people who make horror movies about them. We've had a couple come out about changelings in particular. There's a movie called The Hole, I think, where a little boy gets swapped out for a changeling, and his mother has to go into this big deep hole in like the backwoods of Ireland to go and get him, and she's going to decide which is the real him and which isn't. And and the child that is the changeling, I can't remember if it's the same movie or different, but there's a lot of it where they can't go out in the sun because they'll like disintegrate and burn up. And then in this movie there's like a baby and it like disintegrates in the sun. So she picks the right child. But in the Watchers, it's interesting because, and spoilers, this is new. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it.
Haven't seen it.
Form your own opinions. So just spoilers, little tag right here. But in the Watchers, it's interesting because there's a character who turns out to be like a hybrid of humans and fae. And the fae are referred in the movie as a race of beings that are winged, and they were the native creatures of Ireland before humanity came into play. And they live side by side together for ages, and they're interbred and stuff, but the children were shifting between fae and human form. And this scared people, and so they decided to start culling them, and they trapped like the original fae beings underground. And over the centuries that they were trapped, they lost their wings and they lost their ability to go out into the day. I think they were actually always nocturnal, but they couldn't go anywhere except at night to begin with. But they got trapped underground, so they were like limited more, and this like dampened their power. But there's the children of the changelings and the humans, the Fae and the humans, which are changelings. They could shapeshift into anyone they want, but they have to watch the people who they're trying to mimic.
Okay.
And that's where the changeling watchers part comes into it.
That reminds me of our mirror people from the Chinese mythology, that they need to watch us so that they can come through and take over. It's amazing how these mythos will just like
they're merging, and it's funny because, you know, and we have seen changelings in various other things, like Supernatural had an episode on changelings. It also made me think of Black-Eyed Children a little bit, just like that nature of that's not my child.
That's not,
you know, like they're possessed by something or they've been swapped out. But it was a review, and it literally said that they looked the half-human Fae character, when they transformed and regained their wings, looked like a big biblical cherubim. And I'm like, that's right. Angels don't look like what they're supposed to look like. Because if anyone knows what a biblical angel looks like, you will be surprised to know that they're not depicted very accurately in pop culture at all. We seem to have this thing, like, you know, in Lucifer,
those wings that are just like, oh, look at me,
magnificent, you know, in Supernatural.
And there was like,
they're etherically implied, like you don't see the wings, you see the shadow of the wings, and you know, like, and they're human to a point, like they're superior.
And obviously they've got that radiance that's just exuding from them.
But the only, and this is funny because a further connection I made is that the only angel that I have ever seen in pop culture that is somewhat accurate according to biblical standards is the angel of death in Hellboy 2 Golden Army. Now, the angel of death in Hellboy 2 has the 4 wings. The wings have eyes. The face is like eyeless.
I haven't seen Hellboy 2. I've seen the first one.
What?
I'm putting it down. It's on my list.
I used to watch it to sleep like nearly every night when I was like.
Isn't that funny? Because we think of these, you know, angelic beings as, you know, the wings, the radiance, but when you actually look at the description, and it's been circulating, AI has actually helped us out here. The people actually ask AI to give us a depiction of what an angel would look like based on the actual written words that are in the, you know, referenced in the holy text. And they're wheeled creatures, eyes literally just everywhere.
Yes. Honestly, and that depends on like the different tier of angel too.
Yes. So, and I just think it's very interesting how we've sanitized it because it's horrific.
Yeah.
If we look at it the way it's described, like if you were trying to make a really, really scary image of a demon, you would put eyes freaking all over that thing, that it's just blinking at you and there's eyes everywhere. We've had many monstrous creature that's just got eyeballs just like everywhere. And that's what it's described as.
So the eyeball ones is interesting because the higher up in the echelon they are in angelology or whatever, however the fuck that's pronounced, the more eyeballs they have in places. So the cherubim are actually like these sort of sphinxy hybridy creatures. They've got 4 wings, they've got eyes on their wings, they have 4 heads. So they've got the angel head, which is humanesque, which is described by Ezekiel in his book within the Bible, and he describes it as being human but not quite human, so you can tell that it's not a human.
Right.
Yeah, he's like, the face looks it, but it's not. And then he's got 3 other heads. So there's a bull head, there is a lion's head, and there's an eagle's head. And those
that's just bizarre to me. Like, it's just bizarre considering how much that everything else that is emerging of animal and human is almost automatically bad.
Well, it makes me think of like Egyptian gods and how they were always like animal hybrids in most of
Yes,
their
but
depictions.
Christianity poo-pooed that.
Yes, and
It
then like
poo-pooed it as a
yeah,
concept.
and then you like you just said the evil is animal hybrids. I think of demons always being betrayed with like goat's feet and stuff like that, which goes back to Dionysus and Pan and things, damning that wild masculine and
Yeah.
bastardizing it into something that's we don't go near that. That's Satan.
No, exactly. And
Uh,
it's even just like you've got a demon and it's got darker skin,
yeah,
it's got hooves,
yeah,
it's got a lot of body hair,
horns, yeah,
and then it's got horns twisting up,
yeah.
and then you've literally got and then if you can imagine throw some eyeballs on that, that's it. You'd be
Yes.
a horror god if you wrote that into your books.
But these are angels that we're talking
These are
about,
angels
and
we're
they're the
speaking of.
cherubim. And so the cherubim were tetramorphic in nature, as Ezekiel put it. And then you've got the seraphim above them were described as the burning ones because they were like just radiant and aligned with fire.
Fire.
And they had 6 wings with eyes just all over the place.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's funny because in pop culture, you don't see these different echelons of angels. You only see archangels, and then you see the angels under that, which are like the messengers and grunt workers and that. But there's another rung. Um, Oh, and with the seraphim, Isaiah 6:2 in the Bible, he described them as above stood the seraphim, each had 6 wings. With 2 covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. So it's like,
Yes,
um,
I've seen some actually images not from AI but back actually historical ones that were drawn at the
yes,
time where there
yes.
was a period of time where they actually did
They
paint
did.
it
There's a cathedral
historic,
in
like accurate.
Mexico that has
Yeah.
a depiction of a cherub with the six
Yep.
wings and the different faces and that, and it's still there. There's lots of ones where it's the multi-winged. Um,
Yep.
but there's also this other
Not so many with the lots of eyeballs though.
no, not so many with the lots of eyeballs. And the ones that people look up where they're like, oh, it's rings of eyes, they're called the ophonym. And they're literally, the word is Hebrew for wheels or whirlwinds.
Yeah.
And they are described as big balls, like rings, concentric rings. And I liken it to like an angelic snitch, like from Harry Potter. It's like got the gold with the little wings.
Yeah.
Like that's what an ophonym is. Which it could either take or leave the wings, but they were seen to be the wheels of the chariots of God, and they often were at the feet of the cherubim and the seraphim. So they kind of were just like the transport. But they were rings covered in eyes, and then
They love the eyes, man. They love
yeah,
the eyes.
I
The
don't,
concept of
yeah,
this, yeah, and look, Egypt mythology loved eyes too. Like the whole concept of the
yes,
Horus and the
yes,
all-seeing eye. It's
yes,
we want to be able to see shit.
yeah.
We really
Literally. And then the Illuminati took that further and was like,
see that's what when you talk about these wheeled ones, I think
mm,
sacred geometry. Like I actually
mm,
automatically go to all of
yeah,
these beautiful symbols
yeah,
that what's the one? It's Metatron. Is it Metatron, the
yeah,
archangel that is
yeah,
supposed to look, it's got his own symbol. But I was looking at a thing on TikTok the other day and they were talking about how the flower of life. And if you
yeah,
take the flower of life and do that as a representation, we're looking at it 2D, which is why we're getting
mm,
it confused, and you take it out to 3D, and it looks
yes,
exactly like a whole bunch of,
like
it
an
looks like
orphanim.
that
Yeah,
thing. So I love
there's,
the way they come around a little bit.
yeah. But it also speaks to like an evolution too, because yeah, like you said with the Egyptians and that you got Aya Ra, Aya Horus and stuff, and then moving forward into Christianity and evolving beliefs and stuff like that.
Exactly. We change our mythology. We
Yeah.
change it to
Which
what's
is
palatable to us at the time.
Yeah, which makes sense with the Fae and the fairies and the changelings and things. We've now gone from having Fae and nature elementals and devas and giants and all those sorts of things, which I'll speak about giants like in a bit after I finish my angels tangent and you have a little rant about one of your creatures. But like it's easy to see how those folk shifted into angels and demons and demonic pagan spirits and things like that, because that was quite a big reform in Ireland and in Europe, with the Christian takeover. So, and like even the way they depicted them in the Watchers with the artwork when they're telling the story about the relationship with the humans, it's very medieval depiction. And I was looking at it and I'm like, well, that says angels to me. That doesn't say fae or fairies, but it's like that same being, that same underlying force, inspiration behind the mythology. But the one interesting sort of pop culture reference that I didn't think about until I got into these like echelons of angels was Dominion. There is a show called Dominion, and it's like a post-apocalyptic world. It's based on Legion. So with the angels that come down to protect like the savior of man, they're in a roadhouse diner and there's a jeep, and it's quite popular. But this Dominion sort of takes place in that same sort of story environment. And the Dominion actually refer to like these lower class angels. So you've got archangels and then you've got angels as 8-balls, because they possess people and make their eyes go black, kind of like the demons in Supernatural. And they don't need permission to do it, they just possess them, whereas the angels in Supernatural, they need permission, the demons don't. But these 8-balls are actually kind of similar to Dominion, which are like the lower rung angels under the Ophanim. And these are the ones that get around doing all the grunt work. So archangels had their own bodies. These guys didn't. So they had to get around in human form, be that possessed or gifted.
I forgot that I'd watched this movie. I've actually watched the Legion movie, not the Dominion, but I've watched the Legion. Well,
Dominion, the show, is based off that movie. Like an extension. So you get
and you're right. It's like you're not expecting when you see these creatures coming down, you're automatically thinking demon. Because that's
they're lower rung angels.
They're lower rung angels.
Yeah.
There's a lot of angels you just don't know about, I reckon.
Yes.
I always get these out of order, and there's even ones that they're not. Like I've got Copilot to have told me all of the angels here. But I can't remember the ones what they're called. They're the ones that are angels that have spent too much time with humanity.
So there's actually ones that go further down than that. You got the virtues.
Aren't they called the Watchers as well?
Well, see, that's it. This is the thing, and this is where I'm gonna like loop round to my little conspiracy, because when I was researching this, I'm like, this is all linking. This all makes sense. So there were in the book of Enoch, there were 200 or so fallen angels. So these angels belong to like lower rungs, and they were the powers and authorities and the principalities, and they were supposed to have, according to St. Paul, sided with Lucifer when he fell. But there were, regardless of what genre of angel they were, there were ones that fell to earth, and they were called the Watchers.
Yes,
and this is something that was highlighted in that Russell Crowe movie, Noah. So he explains it as, it's explained in Noah as that the Watchers took the side of man, so they were cast out of heaven.
No, I'm sure it was because they did more than take the side of man, if you know what I'm saying.
So they, in the biblical sense, in the book Enoch, the Watchers came down and they procreated with the
Yes,
daughters of
they had
man.
sexy time.
Yes, and which led to the Nephilim, which were
Yes.
giants. And so
Yes.
this is
We
funny
come back around to the
we come
Fae.
back around to the Fae, because weren't the Fae getting it on with the humans producing changeling children? And giants being like quite a big feature as well in the old European folk tales and stuff prior to Christianity. But yeah, we get them a film in the Bible who literally came abandoned by their fathers. Their fathers were off just causing friggin' havoc. They were telling man things that they shouldn't have. So we get Sodom and Gomorrah committing atrocities, and these giants were just pillaging the land. Like they ate through all the food, they ate through all the animals, they ate through all the vegetation, and then they started eating the people, and then they started eating themselves, and they went all cannibalistic. So, which I was just like, okay, I'm going to talk about giants later on in the piece, because I love Attack on Titan and they just eat people. So,
Okay.
yeah, but I feel like
Can I go to another
you
eating
need
people
to,
kind of
yeah,
thing?
yeah. I feel like this is, I've had enough airtime. We need to
Okay,
get you a creature.
I'm gonna go with creature. Of course, I'm either gonna go werewolf, vampire, werewolf, vampire. Let's do them both
Mm,
because there's so many stories now that have become where werewolves and vampires have become arch enemies. They're two
yes.
races that are in
Yeah.
constant conflict. And I'm here to tell you that's new. That wasn't ever in the mythologies. Werewolves, folklore of a werewolf is a, or you can call them a lycanthrope, is an individual
Yes.
who can shapeshift into a wolf, either purposefully or after being placed under a curse or some kind of affliction. Sometimes it can be related to a full moon. Sometimes it can be not. It doesn't matter. You know, it depends which one you're going with. It first started, there was a mention of a human being turned into a wolf in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Way back then, where
Oh
someone
my
lusted after, yeah,
God. So that's
Ishtar, the
funny.
goddess.
It's funny you say that, because Gilgamesh was supposed to be one of the giants in the Bible.
There's so much of interweaving of these stories. It's just
Yes.
crazy. But
Yes.
basically, a poor old shepherd was lusting after Ishtar. She thought it was hilarious, but then she said, "Oh, I've had enough, and I'm turning him into a wolf." And then he just got eaten by his own hounds. So he was only in there and out. He didn't have the ability to transform. Then we move into Greek mythology, and the Greek mythology is quite interesting. You've
Yes.
got
I know.
Lycon was a
I know.
king.
Yes.
Yes,
And
and he go.
didn't he pay her into like Artemis when she was in the woods bathing or something? And
Well,
then,
all what I've got with this dude, he was a king of Arcadia,
mm,
who wanted to test Zeus, because Zeus
right.
was all like, "Oh, I'm a fan. Look at me. I'm a god. I know everything. You can't fool me." And he actually cooked up, and there is some. It's lots of different people, but in some stories, it's his son that he actually cooked up a bit of his son and served it to Zeus to say to see if he noticed the fact that he was eating human meat. And when Zeus, he knew, right? So he's like, yes. And he said, well, you think this is funny? Boom. King like Lycon, you are now, what is it? Yeah, or whatever. You are now the first werewolf. And he became, and all of his progeny
Right.
thereafter became werewolves. And I think he had 50 sons. So you can imagine they spread like wildfire. Now
Yes.
that's from Ovid's Metamorphoses, book one, where he talks about that. There's lots of little different versions of it, but what I loved about this was there was actually towns in Greece which they think took this a little bit too far in terms of the concept of eating human flesh, and that they were actually a primitive rite of passage was around at a certain point in time having a little bit of a chomp chomp on a human bits and pieces, and that would help the transformation of the young males into their wolf counterparts.
That's very
Um,
interesting.
I thought that was really, really interesting. And
Mm.
this mythology goes on, and Plato talks about it, everyone talks about it. But there is one version of it that states that whoever ate human flesh was said to turn into a wolf and could only regain human form if they did not eat it again for a 9-year period. And after the 9-year period, the cycle of the wolf ended. I love that.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
there's even a story, a lot of it in Greece, that there was actually a boxer that partaked of, he was the Olympic boxing champion way back in the day, and he did this exact cycle of eating in this particular clan's mythos, and he ate of the meat, and then for 9 years he was half wolf, half man, which is where he got his strength and his powers from. So that's how he became the Olympic boxing champion.
That's very interesting. It reminds me of like Nordic berserkers almost, how
Yes.
they would take on those aspects of, rabid wolves or bears or whatever to infuse them in power with power for battle and stuff like that. Also,
Yeah.
the tale of Artemis, I think what you said, old bug got eaten by his own hounds. There
Yeah.
was a story about a
Oh,
hunter
yes.
who I came across her in a glen while she was bathing, and she
Bathing, and then,
caught him and then turned him into a deer or something, and
yeah,
then
you can't be doing that.
he
I think
was
it's also
torn
you can't
apart
watch
by
her
his
hunt.
hounds.
You can't watch her
Yes,
hunt. You're not allowed to watch her hunt.
yes, yeah,
As a thing. Now, what I did find really interesting about the werewolf legends is that the persecution of werewolves associated with folklore was actually part of the witch hunt phenomena. It wasn't as
of
big,
course it
obviously.
was.
It wasn't as big, but it was part of it, and
Yeah,
people were accused of being a lycanthrope, and they went through a very, very similar process of proving that. Basically, we try to kill you, and if you die, well, then we were wrong.
we
Sorry,
were wrong.
everyone.
Yeah,
But if you didn't die, hey, we're right. So it's all good.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and that was it's really, really interesting. And it was mixed with accusations, and I love this, of wolf riding or wolf charming. So again, they try to bring it back to witchcraft, that you had the power to be able to ride or to charm a wolf, and therefore you had the ability to be able to turn. Now, we're
yeah,
not
yeah.
talking, this is in 1590s, that there was a case of Peter Stump that was persecuted for being a werewolf. I think it was in Germany that
Right.
happened, because there was yeah. But the final cases of werewolf persecution
Yeah.
happened in the 18th century. That's not long enough ago to be
Wow.
real. Like,
Yeah.
that's now, what I did love is when you look at it culturally, I effectively can't find a culture that doesn't have the concept of a werewolf in it.
Yeah.
They've got lots of names that we know of, like we've all heard of the loup garou, that we
Yeah.
always use that a lot in our horror movies now, and they always, oh, it's, yes, originated from the loup garou, which came from Trinidad and Tobago and became a Cajun legend about
Right.
this creature that is also synonymous with a rougarou, which is
Yeah,
just a,
the Rougarou. That's which makes me think of Supernatural. They had an
well,
episode of
is
that.
it basically is what Sam Winchester and Dean Winchester have been hunting in the episode Metamorphosis.
Yes, yeah.
And it was in that show, it was depicted as a man slowly becoming bloodthirsty and completely losing control when he feasted on human flesh.
Yes.
That's cool. If you're going to lose it, that's a good way to lose it. But Norse
You
mythology
reckon?
had them. I reckon.
Yeah, well, and it's funny
And this is
because
what
the
I always think, right? If it's always human flesh that gets you, if you eat, I always pick at my own fingers. Can I turn myself into a werewolf?
I don't think it
Don't you think
no,
it works that
I don't
way?
think it works that way. Sorry. Sorry.
Damn it.
Um,
Anyway, Norse mythology, we have
yeah.
werewolves. They're there. And
Ancient Rome was founded on the children of a wolf,
Romulus and
Romulus and
Remus.
Remus, which Remus is a werewolf in Harry Potter.
It is. It's
Oh,
just there's so much of this stuff, and
yeah.
basically we have people could turn themselves. Sometimes the curse comes from wearing a wolf skin.
Yes.
They're in Scandinavia. There is a race of she-wolves known by the name of Maras, which goes back to our bloody sleep paralysis shit.
I love
Like
that.
this stuff is just coming around and around, and they're
Yeah.
half human, half wolf.
Yeah.
And they search for either human or animals. They don't really care.
Yes.
Philippines have them, but they're more the Aswan.
Aswangs,
Yes,
yes.
which is
Oh,
sort of like a little bit vampiric, a little bit
they're
shapeshifter.
disgusting.
We've got Japanese have their own. They've got the kitsune, which was
Kitsunes, yes.
yeah,
Fox
they came up in
spirits.
Teen Wolf.
Yep.
Big time did they come up in Teen Wolf. They have,
Yep.
look, to be honest, the Japanese have a lovely assortment of them, and I don't want to get them all wrong,
Yeah.
but they have a lot of them that are raccoon dogs. So they must have a thing for raccoon dogs in there.
Yeah.
And we even have them in Somalia. So to
Yeah.
be honest, what I thought was funny about the Somali mythology was there was a man who can transform into a hyena man,
A hyena
and
man.
he did this by rubbing himself with a magic stick at nightfall.
Okay then.
Now I'm thinking perhaps something else was going on. And
Oh,
when this person was caught
Lordy.
out, he goes, no, 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 I'm a hyena man. If you just
Hyena
leave me
man.
be,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd get this job done and I'd be
Oh
a
my
hyena
God.
by
I
morning.
wonder if that's where that come from. Like, if you do it too much, your palms will get furry.
It's the bloody Hori Ismaras.
It's the
My goodness.
it's the curse
One
of the
who
hyena
rubs
man.
himself with a stick.
Oh, okay.
That's hilarious. And of course, he had to rub his stick some more to be turned back into his human state by dawn. Now, I'm not making fun of the Somali legend. I'm not. I just think it's funny how
It's
there's
just funny. Yes. So
there
how
is
do we get from Somalian hyena man to like
oh
underworld lycanthrope vampire wars?
God, I love that series so much. And I
The
think, to be
best
honest,
series.
it is the best depiction of both vampire,
Yeah.
because who doesn't want to be a Death Eater? Like, what's a Death Eater? What they
Yes.
yeah. Who don't want to be that? I want to be Celine. Everyone
Celine,
does.
yes, she's dope.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
Um, what I loved, and when I was looking at this, because I was looking, how do you become a werewolf, right? And there's all these different ways, and it depends on which culture
Yeah.
you're coming
Yeah.
from. It can
Yeah.
be wearing the skin of the werewolf. It can be a curse. It can be blood driven.
It can be
It
a
can be
bite.
what I
Yeah.
have you heard this one, and I loved it because only when I saw it did I remember that I knew of this. If you drink water from the paw print of a wolf, you then become a werewolf.
Really? I've not heard that one.
I had heard that one. I'm like, I read the right kind of books.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's lots of different ways. I literally can't list them all. There are so many different ways. Being a
Yeah.
seventh son can cause it. Being conceived
Yes.
under a new
Yeah.
moon.
Yeah.
One here is actually saying not going to confession for 10 years, which I find is really hilarious that
Yeah.
Christianity can think that if you don't do what our rules are, you can become a werewolf. I think
Yeah.
that's funny. Now, how do we kill these guys? Well, we all know the silver bullets. And the
Yes.
silver bullets weren't in ancient mythology. They didn't exist.
No.
But there is, I love it when I go on internet and I find people in all of these Q&A Quora groups and all these kind of forums. And they go, oh, it makes sense because it's the magical law of sympathy and the law of contagion, because silver is associated with the moon. So it really does explain why silver would be used against. And I've like gone, okay, dudes. And they also talk
Really?
about they talk about lots of things in terms of a silver bullet, and
Mm.
although it has a different density to lead, it doesn't fly as well. And Mythbusters tested these silver bullets a million times
Yeah.
and came
Yeah.
back with the fact that it just is not as effective,
Yeah.
but they do have more weight in
Mm.
terms of, but only over short distances.
Yeah.
There is some talk. There's the beast of Gevredan, which was a man-eating monster that actually really did terrorize a town in 1734 to 1767.
Yeah.
Chomped his way through quite a few people,
Yeah.
and there were stories that he was killed by a silver bullet. And
Right.
it was a mistelling of the tale.
Yeah.
There was nothing of that nature, but it was interesting how it comes around. And in Swedish mythology, they think that a silver bullet can effectively kill anything bad.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
it's like in Supernatural, if you're in doubt, what do? you get your shotgun with salt pellets in it.
Yeah, you whip the salt out.
You go whip out the salt. That doesn't work. I'm going to burn you.
Yeah.
Get the fire out. Boom. That doesn't work. All right.
I'm gonna stake you in the
Stake
heart
you
with a
or silver
wooden
bullet you.
stake. Yep.
Yeah. So my most notable references that I loved in these was Teen Wolf. And Teen Wolf goes through the fact you've got all the alphas and the betas and that kind of stuff. And then you've got werewolves that are solitary, are called the omegas. And it's all this like pecking order.
Yeah.
Which makes me laugh because we've now found out the wolves do not have that pecking order.
Yeah.
That they just don't exist in that kind of grouping system that we wanted them to.
Yeah.
Twilight obviously has the,
God.
alpha betas.
Yes. Yeah.
And it being a family descendant line. The problem where Twilight gets that I don't like, and I don't know who the first person who invented it, but the term of imprinting and soulmating of each other and like imprinting with a baby in the womb.
Yeah.
Is a kind of level of gross that I don't really even want to go through.
I think the whole Twilight thing's a little bit.
Twilight just fucked up so much mythology.
The sparkling vampires. Why?
Like, really?
Why? But everyone fucking loves it. There is this guy on Instagram, and I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but all he does is like reenactments of like 2000 teens getting their Bella and Edward on. Oh my God, it's hilarious. Like he's got the whole Eyes on Fire soundtrack going. He's like, Spider Monkey.
And you had to the t-shirts, Edward, Team Jacob.
Yeah, Team Jacob. I'm like, oh God.
Come on.
And
this is what one quote. I've got one quote here that I had to go with.
Yeah.
And this is from our beloved Dean to Sam. And he says, What about a human by day, a freak animal killing machine by moonlight? Don't you understand?
Yeah.
I mean, werewolves are badass. We haven't seen one since we were kids.
Yeah.
You know what the best part about it is? We already know how to bring these suckers down. One of these bad boys right to the heart. Thank you, Dean.
Yeah.
Dean, we love you.
Yeah.
We love you so much. Now, I'm going to go back to your angel thing for a second.
Oh my
God. Because in this supernatural series, they were actually what you had, which was called grace-enhanced werewolves. And by combining the blood with angelic grace and letting them drink it, the Archangel Michael was able to create werewolves with enhanced abilities.
Yes.
Stronger, faster, all of those things.
Yeah.
Love it. But that's what I've got about my beautiful werewolves.
But that's funny too, because in the werewolf vampire like mythologies and things, especially with Underworld and stuff, we get that hybridization again, werewolf cross vampire.
Which also happens in Vampire Diaries.
Yes,
we first of all have them as being in absolute conflict. In Vampire Diaries, one of the only things that a vampire is susceptible to is the bite or scratch of a werewolf.
Yep.
That's the only thing that'll take them down.
Yeah.
And no one can become both because the turn and the two magical systems in
Klaus was the original hybrid because he was already a werewolf when he was turned into a vampire by his mother.
Exactly. And then we actually have in that one, it was the magic of the witch was able to tame down one side of the magic. Yeah. Underworld has a similar concept of having the two different bloodlines, and if we can get someone to survive having both those bloodlines.
Because Michael had the Corvus bloodline, which was like the original immortal, and so if you could blend the two with that, which is funny though, because in the Underworld, the one where you go right back to the start with
yes,
like
I think it was 3, but
number 3, you go back to the start with the original Lycans, that was always my favorite movie out of the whole series. I loved it. I loved the first werewolf,
I love the first scene where Celine jumps off that. It's the first scene of the first movie where Celine jumps off that building, like stories down with her bloody leather jacket flowing out behind her, and she just absorbs the fall and then steps away
like a cat. It's kind of like that cat dog,
Oh,
versus. That's how I've
she's
always,
the boss bitch of all boss bitches, man.
Yeah. But yeah, you get like that hybridization. But then in that movie, he has a child. He ends up impregnating the princess, the vampire.
Yeah,
Victor's
Victor's
daughter.
daughter, Sonia.
Sonia, she was one of my favorites. I love that
Yep.
actress though. And I loved them as a couple in that movie. Just
Oh, and no wonder the vampires were just a bunch of fucking assholes.
They were dickheads.
They're just dicks.
Yeah.
But we always associate that, like, through the mythology of vampires and werewolves, we've got werewolves are being hot-blooded. They're showing all those aspects of a beast, the letting the beast out, and we sort of like
yes
have an endearment towards them because they're allowed to be that. And then you've got the vampiric side, which is the cold-blooded, more corpse-like,
classy, refined,
exactly all of those things. But we also admire both traits. Like there's bits about both traits. And you're either a werewolf. It's like cats and dogs.
Yes.
You either want to be a werewolf or you want to be a vampire.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was younger, I would have probably said vampire, but now I'm just like, oh, nah, werewolf. Werewolf all the way. I get to run around and be a feral, like, you know.
See, I'm a little bit. I'm a little bit more vampire.
Like, I would totally be a hybrid. Just saying, like, I'll sign up for that experience.
If I could power up to be a hybrid, then
yeah.
Who doesn't want to be the boss's bitch badass on the block? Just fucking people up left, right, and center.
Yeah.
But I'm always vampire. Yeah. I like the concept of a vampire. But okay, what have you got?
What have I got? Well, coming back to vampires, because a lot of their mythos is, not being allowed to be in the sun, right? So vampires, a lot of their mythos, I think pop culture, like, just coming back to that, it depicts them rather well. But they're a being that's obviously morphed over time, like, as compared to, the Transylvanian vamp and all that sort of thing. And I think even those myths of Dracula and stuff has really propelled that in pop culture today. Absolutely. I mean, we've got so many retellings of Dracula, stemming mainly from Bram Stoker, in pop culture and stuff. So it's been done to no end, and it's a storyline that it's hard to reinvent because it's just been done so many times. I enjoy every aspect of it, nonetheless.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
I've got to say, I do have a vampire in my book series. I'm sorry, everybody. I sold out.
Yeah.
And he was only supposed to be in there for he was one chapter. He was designed to be in there for one chapter until I fell in love with him. He beguiled me with his charm.
And
I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
And now he is a major character in my book series because he's so freaking cool. It's amazing. But you're 100% right. We now see them as being this almost as beautiful as an angel, really, in terms of their beguiling nature, that we look upon them and they have a beauty that just is beyond. It's magical. It's a magical beauty, a fae-like beauty that we have in these creatures. But when they were originally, they weren't they were more like a zombie, to be honest, in terms of how they looked.
The one reference that I think about all the time was in the interview with the Vampire Anne Rice, her first book in the Vampire Chronicles. This is not in the movies or even in the TV series reboot. But there's a chapter where Lestat and Louis are going through Transylvania and Romania because they're trying to look for others like them, and so far they've been unsuccessful. And this is before they get to Claudia. But they go through Romania and they come across revenants, and revenants are the vampire undead. And they come about and they're literally just like bloodthirsty zombies, and it's pretty much the same in the mythology as she depicted it in the book. And I always just found that fascinating that they didn't go into that in the movies and stuff. But in the book they made note of it, and I was like, So I've always loved that. But the thing about vampires is you know, and to going back to the sparkling twilight thing with the sun, like the sun seems to be a foe to anything, you know, fae, vampires, demons.
In my books, I call them anything that we deem as the night breed.
Yes. Yeah.
We have this, and it's perpetuated through our stories, that we have this thing about the light and the dark. And the
Yes.
creatures of the
Yes.
light are automatically, effectively the good guys, and the
Yeah.
creatures of the dark are automatically the night breed, are
Yeah.
automatically the bad guys.
Well, a creature that I looked into alongside, which actually stemmed off the giants, because, and this goes into like Norwegian folklore. We've got the trolls as well.
Yep.
So trolls, and anyone today will be like, oh, trolls, like Poppy and Branch. They're all there. They got the wild hair, and
Yeah.
you know. They're all colorful and they sing and shit. When we were kids, those troll dolls were terrifying, just saying. Like, they were ugly. And literally likened them to gnomes and even pixies. Like, something I looked up was the difference between fairies and pixies. And fairies,
the pixies can be really mean with little teeth, can't they?
Pixies are like little fucking assholes.
Yeah.
And it again reminds me of like the little tooth fairies in Hellboy 2. They actually get about and they eat people and collect their teeth. So, and I was like, oh, we have a tooth fairy. And then there's the Rise of the Guardians movie. They depict the tooth fairy as like this little hummingbird hybrid lady, and she's got like little hummingbirds. And I always thought that was a cool revamp. But pixies, they're a uniquely British mythology. And it's believed to come from a term for the Pict Celts, because they were like, pixies are supposed to be colored and have wings and have the wild hair and stuff. And it's supposed to be inspired from the Pict Celts when they would paint themselves blue and give themselves tattoos.
Okay.
So the Romans in that came in, they would call them pixies because they were the Pict Celts. And then there's other myths that's like pixies are the souls of unbaptized children who can't get into hell to heaven. So we've got that Christianization of those ancient mythologies. But fairies were not human looking. They were the changeling ones, whereas pixies were a little bit more human looking, but just
and trolls are the ones that pretty much predominantly are big and brutish.
Yes, so
and are more like
got the trolls, which
are they the ones that are under the bridges?
So here's a story for you. So there's two types of trolls in Norway. There are the trolls, and then there's troblins. Now, troblins are like our little hobgoblin guys. These are the ones that the little people get the term the little people, and they had their own little communities and societies and languages and stuff, and they're kind of like the little hobgoblin-y creatures we would think of. And they did like to fuck with people because it was funny, but they generally also like to steer clear of people. And those evolved into like the kids' toys and the trolls and things that we see today, Poppy Branch, and girls just want to have fun. And then you get the trolls, which are also likened to giants in a way, seen as primordial beings of nature. You get the trollgurs, which are like a troll ogre that are primordial beings. They don't fuck with anybody. They're in nature. Don't poke it with a stick. It will bite you. And they're also aligned with the Jotun or the Jotun from Norse mythology, who the Jotun and the Jotun are giants, and they were the primordial beings that gave rise to everything. They were born from Ymir and the primordial cow. Adamhula, I can't pronounce her name properly, but she licked the first giants and the first man or gods from these salt pillars, and
he licked them off the salt.
He licked them, and Ymir fed from the cow, and they gave rise to the ice giants and the fire giants in Ginnungagap, which is like the land between the Muspelheim and Niflheim, which is like the fire realm and the ice realm. So the Trollgurs were likened to them, and they were pretty much just primordial nature beings, but they were not allowed to be out in the sun. They would most likely live in caves and stuff like that. And we see these guys in pop culture, in video games and stuff. They're often like bosses. Skyrim has the giants and the trolls. RuneScape, The Witcher even has variations of this. And the Billy Goat's Gruff was taken from the Eddas, where they had written about trolls hiding under the bridges and things. But also notably, when they were going out in the sun, they were getting turned to stone. And this is something that Tolkien researched heavily in his book, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So he had two types of trolls in his mythos. He had the trolls that were, created by Isengard, which were on the side of Sauron. And then you had the other trolls, which were just the rock trolls that, were always there. 8 people, 8 hobbitses and all sorts of things. And they would turn to stone when the sun come up. And I think everyone can think of that infamous part in The Hobbit where the 3 of them are around the campfire and they're arguing about who's going to eat which hobbit and all that sort of thing. And Bilbo's trying to distract them until the sun comes up and they turn to stone. And I think Gandalf has a hand to play in that as well. So yeah, it's funny that they they're not allowed to be in the light, in the sun, and that's something that's perpetuated throughout any type of pop culture, any type of mythological variation of these creatures. There's nocturnal ones for the dark, the chthonic, and then there's like these light beings who, and
we love that concept. And even when you come back to going back to vampires for a moment, obviously because they're the ones you think of the most when it comes to being susceptible to light. It comes back when you look at who was the first vampire, what's the first reference to the vampire, and a lot of people still believe that the first reference was our other boss bitch of Lilith. Lilith comes back again. She's either the mother of all demons or she's the first vampire.
And it's funny with vampires and things like that. There's often like a curse or a damnation surrounding their nature. Like they're immortal and they seem to have it all and never age, but they always feel eternally cursed or damned, and like they're constantly looking for the light or ways to be in the light. And it seems that in these mythologies, only by integrating with us, like integrating our shadow with our human, we get to step into the light. Like we get both feet in like 1 foot in each realm. That really speaks to the undertone of our psyche, doesn't it? Really, like we all long to explore those taboo bestial parts of ourselves in our world,
because that's how we unlock the power of the hybrid.
Literally, the hybrid.
It's like, and there's so much of it where it's the essence of one being when it mixes with another is where the power is released. Even when it comes with some gods, like you've got some gods in, with Egypt in their mythology, and the gods are powerful, but oftentimes what is his name? Thoth. Is a man that almost becomes a god through this own genesis that he goes through, and his path through enlightenment is through education. But it's interesting, this pathway to being more than, whether it's more than human, more than angelic, more than any of these things. I think it's interesting. I'm just gonna, because I've got so much stuff here on vampirism, I'm just going to go through it really, really quickly. Because what I found really, it's all through every culture. I cannot list them. Everybody has them. Literally everybody has them. We mix them up a bit with zombies. We have a lot of mythology where you can hear a vampire underground because when it's in its coffin, it chews on its own ceremonial robes. It has a bit of a munch by. I must admit, I've got one of those in my book as well. I call them the Nuxia, and they're based on the mythology, and I love them. But what I don't want to go through in real life, we have instances of people being described as vampires and going on killing sprees.
Yes.
In 1884, there was a woman whose husband passed away. His name was George Brown. Oh no, it's a different person. God, I've got it wrong again. There was one lady who her
Sorry,
husband.
George Brown.
Sorry, this is just that bloody. What was her name again? I can't remember her name. That poor
Oh,
ghost.
let's not bring her into
Let's not
this.
remind us. I was her. There was one guy that was died 8 years later. The wife said he comes back, and not only did he lay down with lots of different village ladies, that he tried to strangle them all, and they found when he was in his grave, it was empty, and they
Yeah.
deemed him to be a vampire. And then when they eventually found him, they drove a stake through his heart.
Yes, and that's still a thing that happens
It's
in,
still a thing. In
yeah.
1884, when they had the tuberculosis epidemics were going around the world, a lot of people attributed this, the fact that family lines could just go boom, 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 because
Yeah.
vampires are often associated, old mythological vampires, is they would, once they had died and became the undead, the first people they took out was their family. They
Yeah.
would basically go to, it's not as if they gave them any special treatment, they went for them first. So you
Yes.
hit the family first, then you hit the rest of the village, which is exactly how a disease spreads. So when you've got
Yes.
tuberculosis and it's taking people out, and one
Yeah.
person's dying and another person's dying and another person's dying,
Yeah.
they attributed this to vampirism and said that these people, were vampires.
Yeah.
And to the point where they, in 1884, in and around America, I can't remember which part of America, they were actually exhuming people so that they could decapitate them and pull out their hearts, because they believed that there was a vampire epidemic
Wow.
in this particular place. And they've only found out about this now when someone accidentally came across a body that was in pieces. And then they
Yeah.
went around the area and they found lots of bodies in lots of pieces. And basically, it was because they believed these people were the tuberculosis victims, and the reason families were just like dropping off over the course of years, though,
Yeah.
because tuberculosis doesn't hit quick.
No.
Um, they even got to the point where this particular case with this person, I think Mary Brown or Mercy Brown, um, when they exhumed her, they took out her heart, they mushed her, they burnt her heart, then they mushed it up, and they made her brother eat that
Oh
to try to
no.
save him from not even tuberculosis. They thought it was this to try to protect him.
Oh my
And
goodness.
obviously he died just a couple of months later, because he's just eaten a tuberculosis-ridden bit of body part. Found that interesting. I've just got here in my notes. Vampires are said to have no shadow nor no reflection in our modern beliefs. That only happened after the Dracula, Bram Stoker's mythos came through. There's
Yeah.
obviously a rivalry between werewolves and vampires that has originated in the Dracula meets the Wolfman movie, would you believe? A piece of shit B-grade movie, changed our mythos completely,
Yeah. Yeah.
which just says too much about how easily led we can be, although it might have
Yeah.
been just a fantastic freaking idea and we loved it.
Yeah.
Um, Vampire Diaries have, concepts of the originals and
Yes.
all of that kind of stuff, which Underworld has a similar kind of concept of having the elders, and you
Yeah.
have all of that. And I've got a note here saying Twilight, and all I've got next to it is please don't. I've made a mental note to myself to say,
Excellent.
please don't talk about
Yeah.
Twilight in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form.
That's hilarious. That's funny.
Oh, well, we haven't got any
Oh,
time. I had Harry Potter listed and all of the mythological
oh,
creatures, but
yep.
she's just to say she's just done them all.
She's done them all. They're all in there. I
They're
was
all in there.
thinking with the vampires, I've been watching CSI on Netflix lately, because that's all I've been able to do because everyone's been sick. But they had an episode where there was people who were vampires, and they had one guy who had this clinical condition where he drank blood because he was deficient. And it was just something that he did. And I was just Googling it while you were talking. And it was
I know this one.
Ray,
I don't know. It's pie.
it's Raynaud's syndrome or something.
Again, it's got a name for the actual ology of it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's clinical vampirism, where people have
Yep.
to ingest blood to get what they need because their body lacks it. But it was funny in the show, the people who were vampires, they weren't blood drinkers. Only one of them drank blood because of this clinical condition, but they weren't blood drinkers. They treated blood as kind of like a symbol of the eternal life force or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that would make sense, like that's a kind of a nice way to look at it. I mean, symbolically in magic, we sort of see it in the same way of its ability to amplify and connect.
Don't want to bring it back to religion, but we do also turn it's the blood and body of Christ that we're having wolf down on. Now, of course, that's symbolic.
Yeah.
It's symbolic, but it's not supposed to be symbolic.
No.
It's actually supposed to be a magical magical is the wrong word. A religious sacrament where the priest is given the powers to be able to transform these things.
The wine into blood and the bread into the body. Yes.
It sounds like a lot of incorporation of and look,
it does.
I think that makes sense. We still have people that not that we believe, we know that there's certain foods, if you eat a liver because you run down, you need to have liver. Well, no one likes it. Well, my mum loves it. I can't stand it, but my mum loves it. But there are things that you're known to have high amounts of certain nutritional value.
Yes, yeah.
It just does. And I can't imagine the blood wouldn't be chock-a-block.
And I just think about animals, like there's certain animals within nature that literally live off blood. You've got mosquitoes, you've got vampiric bats, you've got leeches, different types of ticks. There's different that's
all they need.
Yeah, exactly. You've got people in Africa who literally drink cow's blood as a milkshake.
Yep.
They get the little arrow thing and they go click, and then it comes out of the artery and they seal it up with mud, and then they let it stir it and they let it coagulate, and you've literally got a blood thick shake.
I'm not going to say anything because I come from a German background and we have something that's called Blutwurst. And it is blood meat.
Yeah, well,
and it's coagulated blood with a whole lots of chunks of fat in it.
Yeah.
And it's not my personal favorite, but it's better than Tungwurst, which is a tongue mixed in with the blood and the fat. But have I eaten it? Yep.
Yeah.
But I grew up on that stuff.
Blood pudding and haggis and all
when I went over to Scotland, when we went over to Scotland and everyone was like, oh, you're not going to have blood pudding. I'm like, oh, yeah, damn right. I'm in Scotland. I'm having it.
Yeah.
I freaking loved it, man.
Did you? Oh my God.
I've no bones about it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I was like, every breakfast when I went down there, I was like pulling my plate and it was like my sausages and my blood pudding. And I went ham on that stuff.
It is official. Petra is vampire. Vampire. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to see everybody. Can you please put a vote in? I want to see you've either got to be werewolf or vampire. This is not Edward or Jacob. No. It's got nothing to do with about that. It's just which one do you align with?
Yeah.
Are you a vampire or are you a werewolf? Or are you some other mythical creature?
Are you on the hybrid? Would you just
let's have a look? Yeah, you might be having inner dragon. We haven't talked about dragons, but you might be an inner dragon. I want to know what people
I've
been
vibing the dragons today, and I went to the shop earlier and I found this little toy set and it had dragons in it. And I brought one in just because I was like, look how cool it is.
Look how cool it is.
It's got two heads. It looks like something out of a Renaissance picture.
I see yours, and I've got one too. My mum brought me back she brought me back this from Germany.
Yours is like the OG and mine's like the Temu version of dragons.
It's just that I had it there and you were mentioning, sorry, I've disappeared. I had it there. I had to show that came back from Germany from my mum when my mum and my daughter went over.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Overall, there's lots of creatures and things that we could go into, and particularly pop culture wise, I think it's interesting to note that a lot of these ones are connected and they're ever evolving in how we represent them, and they're ever evolving in what underlies our culture and our psyche and stuff like that, like what we prioritize and what we glorify, or what we
and I think we can make everything ridiculously scary if we want it to be scary. I just take a mermaid. Like you see some versions of mermaids and they are terrifying, absolutely terrifying for good reason. Like mermaid sirens, they have that whole mythos of being calling sailors out and doing
it. We spoke about that in the Under the Sea episode.
Yeah, and it's just like we have them, and then but if we want to make them beautiful, we've got Ariel, and she sings like a god, and she can charm with her voice. We have all of these things that we will make it wonderful or horrendous depending on how it works for our storyline.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. And
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So get out there and enjoy some pop culture creatures.
Absolutely.
And go and have a research of their origins and where they come from to see how far off the mark or how on point these shows are that we love to watch.
Absolutely. And which ones do you align with more?
Yes.
Like which one do you get the feels for more? Do you do you want to see the vampire as being a beguiling creature that is almost like, oh yeah, if I have to be something, I'll be a vampire?
Yeah.
Or do you see them as this horrible, bloated, bloody filled creature that chomps on its own ceremonial burial?
Full on I Am Legend, bloody.
Oh, don't. We didn't even mention I Am Legend.
No.
Freaking terrifying.
Yeah. Crazy.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, what are we doing next week?
Oh,
I've got it here.
I don't know. What is it?
Oh, this is going to be a really big one to research. Who suggested this one? It was me. Where science fiction becomes science fact.
Oh, well, okay.
Bugger. That's a big one.
Yeah, I automatically just think when we were talking about outer space.
I know. I'm straight away going there.
And I'm like thinking about the expanse and the belters and the gravity on their bodies and stuff. And okay,
there's going to be a lot of things like that, and that can even be where modern medicine is going in terms of, we were talking about it. This is going to be a really long episode, but I really don't give a shit. I'm happy.
Yes, guys.
Sorry, everybody. If you're still here, thank you for still being here. But this science fiction becomes science fact. I was watching it on the project just last week when they were talking about people embedding equipment, readers and scanners underneath the skin, so they can actually tap and go just from having something embedded under their skin.
That makes me think of cyberpunk, just like
that is
augmentation.
That is so where science fiction becomes science fact. It just is. So there'll be things like that where we get these crazy ass things in modern medicine. And we can explore them. It's going to be cool. It's going to be a cool topic, but it's going to be a big one to research.
It will. We might just have to pick a focus and.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say on this one, if I'm a little bit foggy on the science on this, you're going to have to just let it go because there's too much science. If we're going to go through this, there'll be too much in-depth science. You're going to have to take us on face value on some of it.
Yes.
But I'm not going to know what the name of the reader is on the skin. There's just going to be one.
Yeah, fucking tap and go, pay
tap
pass.
And go. Oh, can we talk about Carl the cat kitten?
Yes, we can talk about Carl the cat kitten. Well, as always, folks, curiosity may have killed a few cats because they come across a few werewolves, and as we know, wolves and cats, aka vampires, don't get along very well. So old Carl's running for his fucking life trying to find the nearest tree, and Granddaddy Cat's just popping down with his, silver bullets and shit trying to get rid of this werewolf, and it turns into Underworld series movie 5.
Oh,
Carl. Run, Carl.
How do you get yourself in these situations, Carl?
Runs in the family. But there is no growth in ignorant bliss.
There's not.
That's it. That's message.
All there is. Oh, that was fun. That was a really fun one.
Yes.
All right.
So join us next week.
Next week. Science fiction, science fact.
Bye.